Welcome to another edition of listener-supported KPBS Cinema Junkie podcast. I'm Beth Accomando. Horrible Imaginings Film Festival wrapped up earlier this month, and it was another great year embracing the darkness. Women, both in front of the camera and behind, had a very strong showing. And what's even more impressive is that women were showcased in a greater diversity of roles and stories. And you could also find them making fun of horror film tropes that related to women, as in Girl Number 2.
Jen, listen to me. Whatever happens, if he gets to that door, I want you to promise me something, okay?
There's gotta be a way out.
Promise me you'll get away, okay? He will come for me first. I will fight him off for as long as I can.
You just get away, okay? You run like hell and you don't look back. Do you understand?
Yeah. Okay.
Just promise me the same thing, okay? If he comes for me first, promise me you'll get out.
It's okay. He'll come for me
Why
first.
do you say that?
Because the hottest girl is always the first to go. What? In situations like this, it's the hottest chick who's always killed off first.
What are you saying?
Oh my gosh, Jen, come on, we need to
No, Stacy, what did you mean by that?
Jen, come on!
Just forget about it, okay? If the hottest girl is gonna be the first one to die here, why would you just assume it's gonna be you?
You really want to have this conversation?
Yes, I really want to have this conversation.
It's just the way it is. It's some people are more attractive than other people. It's not good. It's not bad. It's just like, I don't know, Darwin or whatever the fuck his name is.
Oh, and obviously on this Darwin scale, you're more attractive than me.
Jen.
You know, there are a lot of guys who find me attractive. A lot.
Whatever.
The festival also highlighted the fact that the Brits seemed best suited to mixing comedy with horror in a gallery of shorts that were hilarious and often darkly twisted, like Darknet.
Right then. The mission starts at 0600 hours. That gives him an hour to get in position, get settled, generally get himself organised. Plus it allows time for toilet breaks.
Hang on a minute, Alan. Hang on. You've hired an assassin over the internet to kill Barry.
No, not the internet. Darknet. It's completely untraceable by the feds. So it's full of all the shit the man don't want you to see.
Like porn.
No, not porn. I mean, yeah, there's porn. Of course there's porn, but I don't go on there to look at porn.
Is it weird porn?
Will you shut up about the fucking porn? Darknet is a gateway to the abyss, where anything can be bought or sold.
And you've bought a hitman.
Yeah. Well, I've rented one, like Blockbusters.
And in the spirit of You Can't Keep a Good Zombie Down, the festival showcased a handful of films about the undead that all took the zombie's point of view in some form. Zombies usually reflect our fear of the other and of loss of identity. And for the most part, films about the undead rising take the perspective of the humans trying to survive. But ever since Bub in Day of the Dead in the 1980s, the self-aware zombie has been on the rise. And at a time when our political climate is clouded by hate and prejudice, films that take the point of view of the outsider resonate with special force. For this podcast, I'll be speaking with Horrible Imaginings founder and director Miguel Rodriguez. We'll talk about these trends and also about the festival's decision to open with a radio drama by Neil and Jana Halford. After my interview with Miguel, I'll speak with the Halfords and then let you listen to the first episode of their planned 13-part radio drama, Uncharted Regions. There's something wonderfully audacious about opening a film festival with a radio drama that only uses sound and no images to tell its story. People sat in the darkened theater at the Museum of Photographic Arts with only the twinkle lights above flickering in the darkness. It was a magical experience that started the festival with a challenge to put your imagination to work. Let's begin by reflecting on the festival with Miguel Rodriguez. Miguel, for Horrible Imaginings Film Festival, you have included film as well as panels on literary horror. And this year, you've added another media component, which was a recorded radio play. So what is it that you're trying to do with your festival in terms of covering different kinds of horror in different kinds of formats?
Well, I am interested in expressing dark emotions or fear or anxiety in a variety of different ways. And we have done that with the different types of films we show. But I do think that horror in general as a concept has been part of the human storytelling narrative since we were scribbling on cave walls. And so I'm just interested in exploring all the ways that storytelling has been done in history. And cinema is so young that we're able to explore other types of media that maybe are a little bit older or a little different or express things in a different way. And that's part of just understanding the genre better, which is our mission statement.
So the radio play you included this year is part of something that is hopefully going to be an ongoing series that Neil Halford and Jana Halford are putting together called Uncharted Regions. Mm-hmm. And this particular episode is Someday Over You. What in particular made you decide to include a radio drama this year?
Well, it actually fit really nicely because we had two submissions that we were considering. One of them was inspired by radio dramas, and the other one is based on a short story that became a very famous radio drama called Three Skeleton Key. And so when Neil approached me and told me about the idea of creating his radio drama and the idea that it could be a world premiere at our festival, it was just too delicious to pass up. Neil has worked with me before. I know about his passion and the quality of the work he does. So I said yes.
And what is it about radio drama or horror told in an audio fashion only that you think is different from film or from reading horror on a page? What can it do that's different?
I think that horror can work really well when it appeals to your imagination. In film, sometimes there's an argument between what you show and what you decide not to show. And radio is all about showing nothing, but it's all sound. And I've talked about how sound is 85% of the effectiveness of a horror film. So take that to the radio and you get something highly concentrated. I think that the ghost story, if you think back to people around a campfire telling ghost stories, there's something really primal about telling someone a story just mouth to ear that really works. And then adding sound effects and such, just the atmosphere is heightened to a degree that can be very intoxicating. And I think that's why in the 50s, audio dramas that were mysterious or horrific or supernatural or sci-fi related were so popular, partially because they could use sound to get under your skin.
And did you hesitate at all to have a radio play at a film festival where everybody is expecting to come in and see something that has a visual component, and here there is not?
Yes, I hesitated. I told Neil even, I said, well, there are two things that made me hesitate. It hadn't been recorded yet. That was a pretty big hesitation. And the other one was, okay, so people are going to come and sit in a theater and it's just going to be audio. So I asked Neil, I was like, can we have a slideshow playing maybe? And I think he did put together some visual component, but actually, having a visual component when you're trying to showcase the effectiveness of an audio drama kind of negates the whole purpose. So having the sound play, as long as you prepare, it's like any other film or any other kind of challenging piece that we have put on, as long as you engage the audience, really get them primed for what they're about to experience, they will ride with you through pretty much anything. And, we dimmed the lights to almost black. We told people to close their eyes and use their imaginations. And this is where the power of drama can really come out. And so far, I think it worked really well. I think everybody really enjoyed it.
And what in particular about this radio drama did you like? What do you think it achieved that you feel does the horror genre proud?
Uncharted Regions is a lot of fun because it really harkens back to the days of old where you would have a narrator. It is almost Twilight Zone-esque in its way, but suspense and Mercury Theater and all of these old radio shows from back in their heyday always had a host who drew you into the story and carried, held you by the hand as you were about to open the creaky door to something creepy. And Uncharted Regions has that as well. And what they do really well is they've got a great group of actors who commit completely to the project. The production quality is pretty stellar, and Neil, he is very passionate and puts his he puts everything into his project. So there's no doing things halfway, and it's completely sincere. And so the experience of going back in time to the 50s and laying on the floor on your stomach and turning on the radio and listening to an audio drama, this is exactly what that felt like.
If people like this, because we're going to be playing the full episode here at the end of the podcast, if people like this kind of radio drama, where else can they find this? Are there other podcasts that highlight radio dramas? Are there old ones that you can find online? Well,
basically, almost all of them you can find if you search hard enough. So if you want to experience the classic radio, old-time radio, or OTR, as they're typically called, old-time radio dramas, then you can just Google. But a lot of podcasts have collected them. I know Suspense has collected them. There's a X-1, which does all the old sci-fi dramas. So yeah, if you use your good old friend Google, you can find all kinds of things. Oh, and speaking of Three Skeleton Key, the title I mentioned earlier, the Vincent Price audio drama, with that one you can listen to on YouTube. And YouTube is a good place for a lot of these, actually.
And do you think there's a particular style of horror or subgenre of horror that radio dramas or audiobooks can attack and do better than you can do in film, or that play better than just reading it on the page?
Yeah, I mean, I think that potentially you can do some things where you use the audio factor to your real benefit. Like if it takes place in a radio station or you're making these audio broadcasts, that's how Orson Welles was able to terrify a nation with War of the Worlds, is by if you listen to that audio drama, it sounds like you're just listening to a music program that keeps getting interrupted by these news broadcasts. And I think that's, something like that is a unique and clever way to use that medium to really be effective.
Ladies and gentlemen, we interrupt our program of dance music to bring you a special bulletin from the Intercontinental Radio News. At 20 minutes before 8 Central Time, Professor Farrell of the Mount Jennings Observatory, Chicago, Illinois, reports observing several explosions of incandescent gas occurring at regular intervals on the planet Mars. The spectroscope indicates the gas to be hydrogen and moving toward the Earth with enormous velocity. Professor Pearson of the observatory at Princeton confirms Farrell's observation and describes the phenomenon as, quote, like a jet of blue flame shot from a gun, unquote. We now return you to the music of Ramon Raquello, playing for you in the Meridian Room of the Park Plaza Hotel, situated in downtown New York.
And also, some of the more classic Gothic stuff can be really fun on audio drama. Something like Telltale Heart, where you have the beating heart in the background. If the sound and the audio is somewhat intrinsic to the story, like in the Telltale Heart, or Black Cat, where the final reveal happens because the cat is screaming behind the wall where the killer has walled up his wife. Audio just works perfectly for that.
This year, as in years past, you have had a focus on literary horror, and you've done this again. So what was this year's panel for literary horror like?
Well, the panel was horror literature in the 21st century. So it's a really interesting topic because there seems to be some notion that literature will one day either completely change or disappear, or people aren't reading anymore. And that really isn't the case. Bookstores certainly are struggling, but the topic is about focusing on what literature is doing now and how is it changing and what new writers can do in order to take advantage of some changing markets like self-publishing and ebooks and so forth. So it was a really interesting panel, not just for people who are interested in books or people who are interested in reading horror, but anyone who is interested in becoming a writer themselves and getting some tips on that, particularly since the panel consisted of not just authors, but we had one bookseller, R.J. Crowthers from Mysterious Galaxy Bookstore, who's very savvy when it comes to the writing market, and he was able to give some insights in that particular field. And then, of course, the lead was Dennis Etchison, who has been around forever. He's worked with Ray Bradbury and Stephen King, and he just has so many stories about writing and the craft, and he could talk your ear off.
You've had radio dramas, you've had literary horror panels, you've had dance that approaches the horror themes. Is there something that you haven't tackled yet that you think you want to include?
Well, there was probably a lot. I keep thinking I want to somehow do some kind of gallery again. We used to have a gallery back in the first days of the festival, particularly when we'd have lots of 3D sculpture. We have a local artist named Nigel Brooks who is very talented, and I really wish I could give his work some kind of display again. There's VR, which we've played with a little bit in the past, but I would like to find some way to showcase the potential of that medium to be immersive, particularly for horror. Gosh, I don't know. If anyone has any suggestions, I'd sure be open to hearing them.
In programming this year's festival, did you notice any particular trends or anything new that you're seeing?
Well, one thing I did notice a lot when we were programming is a lot of people, a lot of attempts to slow things down and have a more thoughtful horror film where you take a little more time with the characters, and that can be very interesting, and it could also be very dull depending on the quality of the work. So, but I do like to see that a slower and more thoughtful film is being attempted. But certainly, I'm seeing a lot of filmmakers now taking advantage of new technologies like drone technologies and small camera technologies in order to get shots that would have been impossible just 10 years ago. And if those are employed with thought and with purpose, then they can make a film very interesting and they could really increase the production value. If they're done without purpose, then they can have an opposite effect. And I'm also seeing films that are speaking about, I don't want to say self-referential because that's not necessarily a new thing, but they're taking some of the eras that we know about this genre, and they're exploring and speaking about horror in particular, as well as about whatever the story is. So it might be like Girl Number 2, for example, looks like it's going to be a typical sorority house slasher, and then it turns out to be more about how the sorority girls themselves are meaner to each other than the slasher is to them, and that was a real crowd pleaser of a short film. Things like that, which can, more cleverness. But every year we're finding the cream of the crop. We're going through hundreds and hundreds of films and distilling it down to a concentrated selection that, our biggest compliment and feedback from everybody who went is the strength of the program. And I think that's the best compliment we can get.
You brought up Girl Number 2, which it focuses on mostly female characters. And one thing that I noticed, since I was a judge this year, so I saw the majority, if not all of the films that played, is that there didn't have to be a category of like women in horror or women-directed horror, yet there were a lot of films that had women directors, women writers, women driving the story, and they weren't all the same. There was a real diversity in terms of the kinds of topics that they tackled and the kind of issues they tackled. There were a lot that dealt with perverse pregnancies. There were a number of them that dealt with, kind of a bitchiness between women, that, when women are fighting. A lot of different, and I thought it was kind of interesting that there were these female-centric stories in all of the blocks.
Yeah, and that wasn't necessarily a programming choice. It just happened to be that those were some of the stronger films. Like something like Body Image is very female centric and deals with an issue like body dysmorphia or bulimia that is typically thought of as a very female centric disorder, but does so in a very kind of psychological horror and body horror kind of way that I found interesting. But on top of that, there are films like Born of Sin, which the protagonist in it is an 11-year-old girl who is played really well by a young actor named Bella Anderson.
Mommy wants to talk to you.
Hi, Mommy. I'm fine. I don't know. No. I'll call you later.
And half the movie is the girl sitting bored in her car because her father left her to go drink beer at the bar and left her alone in the car for hours on end. And how that girl deals with this neglectful father, and then and then bad things end up happening. But what's interesting is this girl is playing like 3 different characters at once, because she's dealing with her father and how she knows he's a big baby and he's a crappy father, but she doesn't want to tell him that. And then she deals with putting up with being alone in a car, and then she gets to deal with getting kidnapped later on. I don't know if that's a spoiler, but you end up going through all these different kind of character situations with this one young girl that I think are very fascinating and kind of changed the tone of the movie in a very intentional way that made that one stand out for me. And also, I'm particularly drawn to films that have children actors in horror because, for me, horror is more potent when we're children. And so seeing a child in peril or a child face their fears, there's another one called Nightlight that I love. And, whether the fear is real or not, that is really potent to me and very powerful.
And one other observation I made about the films that were programmed this year, as a zombie fan, there were quite a few zombie films, but I think every single one of them served up a self-aware zombie. So all these films gave us the zombie and tried to give us insights into what it's like to be a zombie or to have that perspective. And I thought that was interesting. Not that it's a brand new thing to have the self-aware zombie. We can go all the way back to Bub and Day of the Dead. But to have the only zombie films at the festival be that, I'm just wondering if you see that as a trend.
Well, I think what I see as a trend when it comes to zombie films is a desire for people to do something different with the zombie, at least different than what you see on Walking Dead or 28 Days Later, where the zombies themselves are less characters and more kind of situations. And so I think that's just it. They're just trying to do something different. And a lot of it is taking the zombie and making it a character. And again, it's not new, but how it's executed is what makes these particular films really interesting. Like in We Together, you have both. You have a bunch of zombies that are your traditional Romero zombies that are lifeless, but then you have one zombie and then his best friend start to kind of remember their living selves because of music that they hear. And oh man, I'm getting shivers right now thinking of it because I really love that short film. It brings me such joy. I don't know what to say. I hope people can find that. There's another one. That one is a lot of fun, but then there's another one called A Father's Day, which is a little more on the touching end, where you have a Father's Day trip between a zombie father and his zombie daughter, where they go and he tries to find flesh for her to eat, and then they start swinging on the swings in the playground, and it's a surprisingly potent little short. And what's interesting about both of those two, not only do they have that self-aware zombie thing, but neither of them have any dialogue. They're told completely through a visual narrative, which I thought was very interesting. And then you have one like Paul's Bad Day, which is only a minute and a half long, but you get inside the zombie's head. And this one I found the most kind of unique, because a lot of times a self-aware zombie is about a zombie coping with being a zombie. But in this one, it becomes revealed that the zombie in his own head doesn't see himself as a zombie at all, and he's wondering why people keep attacking him. And I thought that was, he's kind of trapped in his zombie body. And I thought that was an interesting little trick to pull for a minute and a half short film.
Well, that was actually the approach. Someone had sent me a screener of a film called Wasting Away, I believe was the title. And it was through someone at work, Kurt Conan. It was his cousin who had made it. And that was a feature-length film, but that was the kind of gimmick in that, was that you get introduced to these characters and you think they're all normal people until you, at a certain point, get an outside perspective of what they are, and they're all, just shambling zombies, drooling and groaning, and they don't get it at all that's who they are.
Oh, gosh. They don't know they're dead.
But I think all of those, even We Together, which was a lot of fun, I think that too had a really kind of poignant quality, because there's a point at which, I don't know if I'm giving something away, but it may be hard for people to find these films, and anything I can say that might inspire them to seek it out. But there's a point where it seems like the memories of being human almost cures them. And we don't know if that's really what's happening or if that's just a psychological thing. But that was just a really bittersweet moment, because you think, is that what it's like to be trapped inside?
I do think that is a little bit bittersweet, even though it is such a fun short. But you're right. There's a touching moment where it is their humanity. They basically win their humanity back. Sorry, guys. But the other thing I love about We Together is it's not just the memories of music that brings them back, but it is the memories of working in a pizza parlor. And there's something kind of like Our Town about that. If you remember the play Our Town, where, it's the little things that are important. I get that vibe from We Together, where, it's not some grand humanity gesture that brings a person out of his zombiness. It's seeing his best friend's, pizzeria logo on the back of his old pizza costume. I love that idea, and I think it's amazing. And when he first starts to remember his humanity, what he's remembering is the logo of the pizzeria. I love that. I think that's brilliant. Brilliant.
Well, we've talked about this before because we're both fans of George Romero, that the zombie film from its origins, even if you go back to the Haitian voodoo zombies, have always had this core component of social commentary. And I'm just curious if you think that in our current political climate, zombies also kind of represent the other and this fear of the other. And I'm wondering if by placing people inside the zombie, if there's trying to be this social commentary about the other not being quite so scary or quite so different from us.
I'm silent because, that just blew my mind a little bit. A lot of these movies were made before the election. However, I feel like this idea of fear of the other has become part of our conversation for a little while now, particularly as we led into the primaries and came out of the last year of Obama, and certainly now. But wow, I mean, to view those films through that lens really makes me want to go back and watch them again, because that's true. I mean, all of them take the zombie, which is, something that traditionally it's been the safe kill, right? If you look at something like Zombieland, you have Woody Harrelson going on there able to chop off heads and cut off arms, and it's all fun and games because it's just zombies. They've always been kind of a safe villain that we can annihilate and cut up into pieces, and nobody's going to cry about it. But these films like We Together or A Father's Day and even Paul's Bad Day, actually, you kind of feel bad for that guy. The title, it's his bad day. You feel sorry for them. You empathize with the zombie. What we have here are zombie empathy films. And I think a Father's Day does that really well too, because the turning point at that is you have the father zombie and his daughter zombie confront a human father and daughter team, and it leaves you with an ambiguous ending. But you do have the human, I guess, portion face to face with the other, and what do you do at that point? I don't know. That's very interesting. I love that idea, though.
It's like a mirror reflection in that.
It is. It is a mirror reflection. I really liked that film. I hope other people liked it as much as I did.
Well, yeah, I thought all the zombies. There was also Excarnate is also kind of a zombie. It's not.
true.
I don't think they specify that they're zombies, but they're definitely these kind of undead characters. But there's that notion of finding the person that's inside that undead being.
Spare us, O Lord, from sin, from wrath, from sudden, unprovided death, from the snares of Satan, by your birth, your holy resurrection.
Excarnate I found really interesting. And again, we should do a spoiler warning on this, but what makes Excarnate really interesting is you do have, I guess, what are essentially zombies, but the way they're used is they are taken and grieving families are trying to find rest for the souls of their loved ones by putting their ghosts back into their zombie bodies so they could then kill them. That idea is so unique to me, and the fact that what I find very interesting about it is the theme is a grieving family finding closure. Like that's it, and it's using these kind of supernatural and over the top things to get that across. But yeah, in the end, it's a movie about family and family connections and again empathy and sadness. It's a pretty sad movie too when it comes down to it.
Now!
Is there anything else you want to mention about the festival? It's now over, and most of the screenings were quite full. It was a successful year this year. A lot of great films, shorts and features. Is there anything that stood out for you?
Well, I guess standing out for me, I think I'm hoping that as we move forward, we're able to see the kinds of themes that we're able to do. I'm very proud this year of programming according to the message in the films rather than the genre of the film. So in the past, I would make a comedy block or an animation block, but this time you could have comedy and animation and scary things all in one block if the thematic theme was all the same. So I think one of my favorites this year was the block called The Loved Ones, which included We Together and A Father's Day, as well as Blood Sisters and some of my favorite films. But they're all about the horror stems from the relationships we build with each other and the close family ties that we have, or relationships among lovers or brothers or siblings, and being able to program in that way was really just so satisfying. Having Dee Wallace arrive was really fun, and I can't wait to have her Q&A online. We got that on video because she's just such a great speaker and was a lot of fun. And honestly, just hearing people talk about how strong the films were. For me, as a programmer working with an amazing team, all the work that we all put into this together, for people to constantly come up and talk about what a great festival it was, what strong selections there were. For the award winners, I mean, every person who got their award online today said, we're so honored to see ourselves listed with all those amazing films. It's just really satisfying. That's the best part.
All right. Well, thank you very much, and congratulations on another successful year of Horrible Imaginings.
Congratulations go to you as well. Thank you.
That was Miguel Rodriguez, Horrible Imaginings Film Festival founder and director. Before the festival began, I spoke with Neil and Jana Halford about what creating a radio drama in the new millennium is like. And following their interview, I'll play the first episode of Uncharted Regions. This will be an exclusive debut of Someday Over You. The only other ears to have heard this are those that were at the opening night of Horrible Imaginings. Neil, At this year's Horrible Imaginings Film Festival, Miguel is going to have you present a radio drama at a film festival, which sounds brilliant. So, I want to first begin by asking you, when did you first get the germ of this idea? When did you decide radio drama was something you were interested in?
It kind of goes back to my first job out of high school. 3 days after I graduated from high school, I went to work for the radio station. It was a small station. I think their Arbitron ratings were lower than most people's shoe sizes. I think the guy was running as a tax shelter because there were kids running this radio station. And so in our spare time, my friend and I decided that it would be fun to kind of start messing around in the production studio because most of the time it was vacant and nobody was using it. So we decided we would start producing strange stuff in the studio. And then we got this crazy idea that one year, let's do something for Halloween. And of course, when you start talking about radio and Halloween, there's one go-to is thinking about, obviously, the old Orson Welles War of the Worlds broadcast. And so we did our first radio drama based on sort of a local legend called The Bulldog Man. And we enjoyed that experience so much that we decided to start messing around more and more. And over time, it slowly evolved into a series called Uncharted Regions. And so these were not, it wasn't a regularly produced something. It was whenever we had spare time, we'd do an episode. He said, let's do one this month. And we did that intermittently between 1984 and 1989, which was our last episode. So this is something that goes back fairly far with me. And so that's sort of where my particular, love of the genre kind of comes from. The 80s were kind of a cool time period. There were a spate of all these really amazing radio dramas that were coming out in that time period. One in particular, which has always been kind of my guiding star from the original series and continues to be for the new one, was a series of radio dramas called Bradbury 13.
This is Ray Bradbury. Join me for the next 30 minutes on a tour through time and space. Come along to the far future. Follow me into a strange past with stories that almost could be or might have been. Real or unreal, this is Bradbury 13.
And extremely well done. It won a Peabody Award. And that's sort of been, that's really what got me fired up about the idea of doing these radio dramas in the first place.
And you're also a filmmaker as well. So you've been interested, you and your wife are both filmmakers. So you've been interested in both the visual and the audio kind of elements. So what kept you going in kind of both directions?
Well, of course, for film is something that I was one of those kid filmmakers. There was a magazine called Cinemagic that I had picked up which there were a lot of magazines available which were about how to make special effects for Hollywood. But Cinemagic was something that was special because it was actually aimed at people who were hobbyist filmmakers. And I picked that magazine up and I really became fascinated with that at that age. And so I've been a filmmaker from way back. And then whenever Jana and I started talking about doing films back in 2007, I think, is whenever we first got our first really good camera. And we started with a production of a series of, it was kind of a online documentary series that was in support of a
charity event.
A charity event. But I think that for both of us it doesn't really matter what the media is ultimately, is that here's an exciting project that gets me charged up, because in addition to being filmmakers and working on this audio drama project, we're both writers, and my day job is usually working in the computer gaming industry and writing the stories for that sort of thing. And so for me I just want to tell stories. And it doesn't really matter to me what the in project is, in terms of, it's just, here's a project that's really got me excited right now. And so let's kind of see where this particular trail leads.
And I think with you, Neil, your love of the audio side of things is always going to be there. You know, when we were doing The Case of Evil, our first horror short, when I was listening to you edit that, you know, I would often be in another part of the house, but I could hear what was going on in the office. And I commented to him after a while that much of the story would have worked as a radio drama, as an audio drama. I mean, there were certain atmospheric things that I'm glad we did it as a film. There were certain things that you can't really describe, a voodoo altar or anything very easily in a purely audio format. But the main exchange between the two characters sounded to me like something out of an audio drama, and so. I think that's something that's always going to be there with you. You were a musician and you've written for different things, but something that I enjoy seeing too, is especially at the point of life we're in, is how sometimes earlier projects, some of which didn't go anywhere or didn't get completed, sometimes the loose ends start to tie up. And so seeing these, this story that Neil's been telling me about since we first got together actually get completed, and then now we're starting on a next one, which was another unfinished thing. It's nice to see that, and it's nice to see how some of these ends connect in the whole tapestry of a lifetime. For example, the radio scripts that Neil wrote for that little radio station that didn't have a huge audience, those got used as his portfolio pieces to get his first job in Los Angeles in the computer game industry. So even if you hadn't done these things later, it wasn't like those were for nothing. But it's nice to see these things continue. I tease him that he is his own intern. He's working with his 30-year younger self to get these first few stories underway.
Jana, did you have a connection to radio dramas? Is that something that you immediately had kind of a love for, or is that something you came to after working with Neil?
Well, like most people, I've always loved the whole idea of being read to or being told a story by any number of means, but I too can remember that era of wonderful radio dramas that were often played on public radio, actually. Most notably for me, The Hitchhiker's Guide.
The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy by Douglas Adams, starring Peter Jones as the Book.
I personally think that was the best version of that story. I absolutely love the radio version of it, the radio dramas. So I enjoyed that kind of thing. I hadn't done the audio work, the radio work that Neil had done, but like him, I like to tell stories, and so whatever format they're in, we enjoy them. I was kind of surprised how boxed in some people are. A while back, Neil actually had a colleague in games saying, well, maybe it's not good for your career to be spreading yourself all over doing these other things, doing film, doing audio drama. And Neil said, I'm a storyteller. What's the problem?
I had, whenever I was growing up, my father was someone who did everything. And he was in a slightly different, he was more in the manual arts kind of stuff. But Dad, he knew how to build things with his, he could, was good with carpentry, he could fix cars, he could do all this other stuff. And Dad, I don't think there was ever a point at which Dad ever stopped and thought, can I do this? He just decided, I want to do this, and he'd do it. And so he decided at one point, hey, I want to paint. And so he went out and bought a bunch of oil paints and started painting paintings. And, he was never going to win any awards for being an artist or what have you. But that was a quality that I got from my father, was that are you interested in something? Go out and try it. And the worst thing that happened is that maybe it's not as good as you hoped it would be. I think that we have kind of lost something, because that there was a time in which people were said it was a good thing to be a Renaissance person. And now it's all about being a specialist. You're really, really good at one thing. And I would say at the end of the day, that's still true with me, in as much as I am probably a writer first, last, and always. And then everything else just kind of falls out in terms of whatever is appropriate for whatever I'm working on.
You mentioned A Case of Evil, which was a horror short film that you made that was done in black and white and kind of harkened back to kind of the universal horror films of the 30s and 40s. So with that film and with the radio drama, there's this sense of both of them kind of harkening back to a different time period where we had different kinds of expectations about what the storytelling was like. Is there something about that? Is it nostalgia, or is it about the format, or what is it about that seems to attract you?
For me personally, I think it's that I don't even necessarily sit down and think about, I want to make something that's retro. That's not really in my head, really. Obviously, and you're right. It's that we certainly have a tendency to kind of go back and approach this from a stylistic thing. But I look at it in the same way of saying it's a particular style of storytelling that really appeals to me. It's hard for me to describe why. I think the main thing is that there was a love of language in both the radio and the film of that earlier era. I think there was a lot more emphasis on the dialogue that you just don't see that kind of approach in films today. We've gone to a much more minimalistic kind of approach to things and say, oh, well, now we're going to make, films that are realistic. I think there are different ways of talking about what's real and realistic. I mean, I look at the front page. The second version is still, I think, my favorite version, the one that's obviously with Cary Grant and Rosalind Russell.
Oh,
yes,
as his girlfriend.
That was his girl Friday. Okay, so, but all the same stories. There are 4 versions of that, to the best of my knowledge. But the second one and the third one are my favorites. But I think the second one's still my favorite one. But the dialogue.
Got a better offer, huh?
You bet I've got a better
All
offer.
right, go on, take it, work for somebody else. That's the gratitude I get.
Oh, I wish you'd
What were
stop
you when you came
panning.
here 5 years ago? A little college girl from a school of journalism. I took a doll-faced hick.
Well, you wouldn't take me if I hadn't been doll-faced.
Oh, why should I? I thought it'd be a novelty to have a face around here a man could look at without shuddering.
Listen, Walter.
Listen, I made a great reporter out of you, Hildy, but you won't be half as good on any other paper, and you know it. We're a team, that's what we are. You need me, and I need you, and the paper needs both of
Bold
us.
Americans.
That 500 miles an hour dialogue and everything. And of course, Moonlighting, which later came back and really replicated the feel of that along with sort of The Thin Man. They kind of mixed a lot of those elements together. But I love the use of language. I love the human voice. And I said that's one of the things that with both The Case of Evil and with this project, it's maybe a little more florid than some people today are used to. In the same way is that we grew up reading Tolkien and reading Dickens and people like that, and today people have less tolerance for that because there's just too much description. It's too slow. It's too blah blah blah. But I love that stuff. I really love the way they develop and everything. So at least for me, that's sort of my attraction. So
something that we've had to tell people that we're looking to for future scripts and to play other roles in this audio series is this is not a retro series. The first script does have flashbacks to earlier times, but some things are set in the future or literally in other worlds. So it's going to be a very eclectic series, and one of our writers wants to do a Western. It should be quite interesting to see the variety there. But I enjoy a lot of the older work. Like Neil. Now, Neil, something that I discovered about him pretty quickly, if ever he wasn't feeling well or just was having a bad day, I would probably find him watching some grainy old black and white movie on television, and it would just make him feel better. And if it had clicks and pops and bad splices, that was almost better. And so he does have a love for the older things. And I do too. I love history. I love storytelling. And whenever we're working on something, I often listen to music from that era to sort of help me time travel a little back into the feel of it. And we try to be as close as possible as we can be to being true to a particular era without totally alienating a modern audience. So it's a fun experience trying to do that. But
one of the things we had to kind of work on with the cast, I think, in this one a little bit is I think they were wanting to kind of approach this a little bit more like it was The Shadow or something like that. And I said, I love those radio dramas, but I said, again, this if we were replicating anything, we're replicating radio drama in the 80s, which was it was more like a movie on a movie that was just audio, whereas I think that earlier it was a different feel to the way they approached them, back in the 20s and 30s and so on and so forth. So, again, I think it's just the main thing is that we're looking for a kind of experience that is again, there's that a certain kind of rhythm, and there's a certain kind of feel to the approach to the dialogue that is a little different than when it would be handled today.
And something that's a personal interest of mine that I've written about is realizing through some things how what seems like a large space of time isn't always that many generations. And so some things, an era that seems long ago, like Gangsterland Chicago or whatever, it's not that terribly far connected from the present day when you look at the generations and all. And there's a little hint of that with this first story, with Someday Over You.
So we're going to get to hear the entire episode at the end of this interview. But just to give people a little flavor right now while we talk about it, let's hear a little bit from the opening.
Beyond everything we know, beyond everything we believe, an infinity of alternate worlds spin invisible alongside our own. Time may run backwards, or the impossible become the probable. At every turn, wonders or terrors await those who unwittingly cross over. Welcome, travelers, to the Uncharted regions.
Okay, so for somebody who may not be familiar with radio drama, they are probably familiar with things like Outer Limits and Twilight Zone, and this has that kind of flavor. So what were you thinking about in terms of calling this Uncharted Regions? What is what can people expect from this as it moves on?
I think what we're definitely looking at is that with Uncharted Regions is we're looking for tales of the unusual, things that are on sort of the borderlands. And so, we'll have far future stories. We have a Western that's being written. And so our only requirement is that there's at some point where we're going to take a step to the left and we take a departure from normal reality. And so it's definitely a story about, I don't necessarily say it's always supernatural because it might be a science fictional element as opposed to a supernatural element. But it is going to be about the strange, the weird, the ultra. If you enjoyed the Twilight Zone, if you enjoyed Outer Limits and that kind of stuff, this is a series that's made for you.
The title also kind of summons up ideas of H.P. Lovecraft as well, the sense of the unknown and kind of things that might be scary out in the unknown. Is that also an influence?
Yes. And also another phrase, obviously, here there be dragons. It was just the idea is that part of the map that we haven't been to before. And so here's the unusual experiences that are not what the ordinary person is going to experience.
And with that, a whole range of emotions. Some things will be darker, more menacing things. Others will be somewhat funny or more uplifting. So there's quite a bit of variation. And some things probably a weird mix of all of the above, and that's life. So
yeah,
looking forward to that.
Again, even though it isn't necessarily specifically what we're doing with the series, there's definitely, again, we kind of have to look at Ray Bradbury as kind of because his work really covered a whole broad spectrum of stuff from very dark horror stuff to kind of funny to, look at Martian Chronicles versus, Dark Carnival or what have you. And so there's quite a spectrum of stuff there. And so that's the one thing that we want to make sure is that it's not all one note. Someday Over You has a very, kind of classic Twilight Zone-ish kind of feel to it. An episode that we're actually co-writing with Star Trek writer Jimmy Diggs is going to be more of a sentimental side of things, and it's more of a sweet kind of story.
With a refreshing, unexpected twist to it, I think, too.
And it's going to be fun. And so we're working to try to make sure that we're not just one note. And so that every episode is a little bit different and has something different to offer. And so as you listen to the whole series, you kind of feel like we've covered a whole different gamut of different episodes. We have another episode that's being written by Jeffrey Thorne, who just became a showrunner for the Marvel Black Panther series. He's writing us a kind of bittersweet kind of story. Anyway, I'm looking forward to kind of having people listen to the different episodes, and we have all these different colorations. And the other advantage too of bringing in some other writers is so it isn't just all me, or just all Jane or what have you. Is we have some different voices that are coming in, and I think that's another part of the thing of that Uncharted Regions is the fact that you're going to have different viewpoints, different ways of approaching stuff. I was very sad that about a month ago, a very dear friend of ours who was going to come in and write for us, who was another writer for Star Trek, he passed away unexpectedly, but he had pancreatic cancer. And it looked like he was beating it, and then things took a very bad turn for the worse over a period of about a week. And he's gone. And so he was going to write one of our episodes. And so our next episode, Haven, is actually going to be dedicated for him.
And what's his name?
Paul Robinson.
Paul Robinson. Mm-hmm. Now, you do film, you do stories for video games, and you do these radio dramas. So as an artist, as a writer, what are kind of the different challenges of storytelling in each of those formats?
With each one of them, there's sort of, first of all, the expectations of what the audience is going to be. With gaming, it's an industry that's changed profoundly from whenever I first got into it. At the time, back in 1990, whenever I got started, no one thought much about there being much text in the game because that's sort of the expectation. And of course, we're coming out of games like Zork and Adventure and this stuff. And so we started to get into the graphical adventure games. And so no one really objected to there being much text. And of course, I have, at the time, I'd written, we had done an adaptation of Raymond D. Feist's magician novels. And so I'd actually created a new story set in that universe. And one of the things about it, whenever we got done, is there were more words in our game than there had been in any of Ray's books. And so, and actually, I think I held the record for a while. It's probably the wordiest computer game that was ever created. I've been surpassed over time, but as time has gone by, the expectation has become less and less about there being dialogue and there being all this other stuff that's out there, and so it's more about much more emphasis put on exploration or fighting or what have you. But that with a computer game, a lot of your work is focused on sort of peeling back layers of the onion. It's kind of a mystery. You discover the story not through characters talking to each other. It's by you discover things and you start kind of putting pieces together. And so it's a process where the player is heavily involved in deciding what that story is going to be, which makes it difficult because you and I know there's only one ending to Star Wars, right? Mm-hmm. Any ending that didn't involve with a Death Star being blown up is the wrong ending. But in these days where players want to have decision about whatever they want to end, is it no? The ending of the story is that Luke picks up his father's lightsaber and joins Darth Vader to go out and conquer the galaxy. That would be kind of interesting, but not the movie that we knew that we needed to see. So, I think every different genre has its own challenges. I think with film, obviously, is that it's visual, and you need to be able to tell everything. Tell the whole story is that it's not all about people telling you things or explaining things. It's about what the players or what the players. See, that's my default is I always go to the player. Not the viewer, not the whatever, but whatever the viewers, they're kind of watching the story unfold, and also with a novel, if you misread something, you can always go back and reread the last chapter. With a movie, if you're watching a theater, you can't stop it. I mean, you can once you've got the DVD, but there's much more in a film. You have to be much more careful about how much you expect the audience to know and understand. And so you give them little bit dribs and drabs, but you don't want to hit them with everything all at once. And so anyway, every format has its own kind of challenges and limitations and advantages. And so I don't know that I really have any particular one that I favor over the others. I think that it's just whatever mood I happen to be in, and so I'm in a film mode right now, or I'm in the audio. So right now my head is definitely in the audio space right now. So.
And I think that's something a lot of people don't think about, that when it comes to writing stories for computer games, if you're writing a novel, you don't have to worry about 5 different possibilities of outcome. While in a game, potentially every time somebody decides to turn in a particular direction, it's going to affect what happens, which is why both of us tend to write tomes anyway, but then when you're writing a game, you really outdo yourself.
You have no idea what an accomplishment it was for us to do The Case of Evil and do it in 10 minutes.
Case of Evil was done on a challenge that
I was in 2012. I was at Horrible Imaginings, and I had helped our friend Jimmy Diggs on a shoot for a project he was working on, and they were showing the trailer for it at Horrible Imaginings, and they'd asked for me to come out and introduce the film. So I step up in the front, and I'm starting to talk about Jimmy's film, and then Miguel yells from the back of the audience, "You still owe me a film!" And and so I said, "Okay, I don't have one for you this year, but next year." And then, of course, unfortunately, in the next year, we didn't really have the resources to do it, but it was like a month and a half before the final submission deadline for Horrible was going to come up, and we said
in 2014.
In 2014, and I said I have an idea, and and so I sent something to Miguel. I said I'd really like to submit something. He says great, and I said, well, I have the script. And I sent it to him. He says, "Okay, well that's great." And he says, "When do you think you'll have the film?" And I said, "We'll have it by the deadline." Well, we shot it over 3 days, but the editing was at least 2 weeks. And then the music, we actually had a temporary soundtrack that we submitted to Miguel, and he approved it with a temp soundtrack. But the final soundtrack took about three more weeks between whenever we turned it in and we actually had the final version done, because the music was being done all around the world.
Only a man who truly knew what was in that case would come so far, willing to pay so much.
Its name is Staggerly.
Well, now, based on A Case of Evil, the sound work in that was very meticulous. We talk about the fact that you were talking about how this is a black and white film, kind of that harkens back to the Universal horror and stuff. And the soundtrack sounded like one of those old films with the pops and scratches and dust or whatever. So that seems to have you perfectly primed for working in radio, where you have a lot of layers of sound.
Well, I think, it's, one of the things that when we were talking about doing The Case of Evil, I said a lot of people decide whenever they're going, some people decide, I'm going to do a vintage film. And so they say, okay, great, we're going to shoot it in black and white, or more likely we shoot in color, and we do the black and white in post, which is we shot in video, but it says, no, you have to think about it. It needs to be lit the right way. It's not just that you turn off all the color. It's about your use of shadow and everything else. There's a lot more to it than if you want to really recreate that. But and this is actually a curse of a lot of filmmakers out there, is the fact that a lot of filmmakers tend to be entirely visual and don't think about the audio portion of what's going on. And what I know and what you know is that audio is much more important when it deals with emotion. Is that you can have a movie that looks amazing, but if the sound is bad, everyone will hate it. Is the fact, and it's very, very important. And so the audio plugs directly into your limbic system. And so the right song or whatever will profoundly change your mood. And so we knew that in order to evoke the feel of those films is we needed to get to the sound of those films. And so, you have to go in and change the EQ. You cut off the top and the bottom of the sound, to give that kind of slightly tinny and hollow kind of sound to it. You need the pops, you need the hiss, you need all of that stuff that's in there, because that is part of that experience. And again, she was kind of talking before about, whenever I'm watching old movies, is that I love all of my beautiful, restorations of the old Universal, horror films and everything. But there's a part of me that wishes that I also had a version of the stuff that I watched as a kid growing up. And when I was, I would be hiding under the coffee table watching the Plenty Scary Movie, which was our local sort of horror host kind of program that ran in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And there was sometimes whenever, particularly in Dracula, where there's incredibly long silences, just where you're walking around in the castle or what have you. Some of the scenes in the crypt or when they first come in the door, there's just 3 minutes of silence almost. But there's that hiss and there's this pop and it's just creepy, and I think so that was really important for us. And so, but yeah, I think that having the experience with the Case of Evil definitely was an opportunity to kind of step back in time. And also, whenever we were approaching the Case of Evil in particular, we were talking to Merrick and talking to some of the other actors about the way they were approaching the dialogue. And the one thing that was important to kind of impress upon them is say that the actors that were coming in and acting in Hollywood in the 20s and the 30s and the 40s, most of them were starting off in radio or on stage. And they weren't being taught to perform for the camera. It's a totally different acting style. And so, but a good chunk of people were coming in from radio. And so that was the one of the things that I was very conscious of, is that approaching it basically as a filmed radio drama. And so kind of coming back to doing what we're doing right now was just perfectly natural, because it's like, okay, now we just get rid of the visual element. And I think it is a challenge, because whenever you're looking at doing something that's for the audio drama, is I need to tell the story entirely just with sound. And there are certain things where in a film it would be conveyed by an expression, just somebody looking over at another character and say, okay, I have, it all has to be in the voice. And so, and that's another thing about kind of trying to cast the project, is finding people that can have that kind of sound, that voice, being able to convey everything just with their voice. And it's harder, I think, to find actors that are trained just for that.
So did you have any particular challenges in editing Someday Over You? What, were you having trouble finding sound effects or elements or anything like that?
Sound effects are, thankfully, that's the wonderful, beautiful thing I love about doing this now as opposed to doing it, whenever we were working on the original series, is if you're looking for sound effects, there are no shortages of places to find them on the internet. I mean, we thank them we will thank Pond 5 at the end of the episode, because probably about half of these sound effects all came from from Pond 5. But I also did a fair amount of Foley for the episode, and so I'm fortunate enough to have some fairly good sound gear at the house. And so Jana was having some times where she was needing to go to sleep, and so she'd get up and go to work the next morning. I'm crashing around the house, throwing things around and screaming and groaning and doing all kinds of things.
And me suggesting alternatives to hitting the washing machine, which I do need. Yes. You can hit the heater. It needs replaced or repaired, but you can't hit the washing machine. We've had interesting conversations as a couple about these things.
But the one thing that we really do appreciate was being able to get our original source here with KPBS. And Dawn did an amazing job in making sure. And that was a big relief for me, because not having to be watching levels and allowed me to pay attention to what was going on with performances and to direct. And so that was a big advantage, because whenever we did the original series, I was directing and recording and everything all at once. And so it's much more difficult to kind of do all that at once. But so I really appreciated having Dawn there to kind of help us out with getting a nice clean capture for it.
Now, when you're writing something for radio, do you have to make an extra point of like reading it out loud to yourself, or is there a time when you want to just make sure you're listening with your eyes closed to make sure that you're getting all the information from the audio?
That's me, regardless of whether I'm working on radio or not.
Me too. Me too. It's something we talked about when we first got together. We both read our copy aloud, and I can tell with written pieces whether or not an author does that. because that's something very important to both of us. It has to sound good in a speaking voice, varying length of sentences, and there's certain things we both do that are very important to us.
This is me kind of cycling back into that whole thing about the sound of the voice and everything else's, but I really tend to like authors that have kind of a poetic kind of flow to the way they write things. And so whether I'm writing prose or I'm writing whatever, I always read my copy aloud.
So you say 13 episodes. So what is the future for Uncharted Regions?
Well, so the first thing is obviously get them all done. I still have episodes that are being written. So I have two more, I have one more that I'm writing kind of on my own, and then Jana and I and Jimmy Diggs are collaborating on another one. And we have, and so Jana has one that she's writing that's her script, and then we have some others that are coming in. But once we get done with the whole lot of them, we're hoping to find possibly a station that might be willing to air them. I would love to actually have them broadcast over the air if possible, simply because, number one, that's the way I discovered radio drama myself. And I also think that there is a higher chance of accidental discovery with radio than there is with the internet. I mean, I don't have anything to back that up other than it's just a gut instinct. It's the fact that if you're on the internet, the chances of you accidentally stumbling across radio dramas is not terribly high. You have to be searching for that sort of thing. But I think that if you're on a public radio station someplace or what have you, it's just kind of natural because it's the kinds of people that I suspect are going to be into this sort of thing are the people that listen to these stations. And so after that, I've had a couple of internet radio stations who said they just would really love to play us, maybe iTunes distribution and all that kind of stuff, but. First, I got to get them all made.
Yes.
But we have our plans for world domination. So
we're going to hear the first episode of Uncharted Regions, which is going to be Someday Over You. And is there anything you want anything you want to leave them with before they listen to this?
I just say that I don't know. What do we want to leave them with?
Oh, I hope that they enjoy the story, and I really enjoy hearing the actors, hearing the words interpreted out, and Devana did a great job. Everybody did a great job, and just let them tell the story.
For people who aren't used to listening to radio dramas, I really do suggest they do it in an environment where they have an opportunity to really listen to it. Because there's a lot of stuff that's going on, and I think that there are certain elements of things, because this is all being carried by word, if you're not paying attention to it, you may lose important stuff. And so I think that's one thing, is that we tend to, in this day of multitasking, we don't always attend to whatever's going on. And so I don't know that this is such a complicated or intricate story that you completely lose it, but I think you'll enjoy it more if you basically set some time aside and said, I'm just going to sit down and listen to this and put your full attention to it. I think you'll enjoy it much more if you do it that way, rather than having it on in the background while you're doing something else. That's just my own kind of 10 cents.
Well, thank you very much for speaking with me, and I can't wait to listen to some more episodes of this. Radio drama is a lot of fun, so thanks for being here.
And thank you for having us.
Thank you.
That was Neil and Jana Halford, the creative team behind Uncharted Regions. I spoke to them just days before the first episode, Someday Over You, would premiere at Horrible Imaginings Film Festival. Now you get to have a chance to listen to it as well. Enjoy.
Beyond everything we know, beyond everything we believe, an infinity of alternate worlds spin invisible alongside our own. Time may run backwards, or the impossible become the probable. At every turn, wonders or terrors await those who unwittingly cross over. Welcome, travelers, to the Uncharted Regions.
The sounds were from a different time, from a a different place. They were the sounds of smoke-filled back rooms and deserted alleyways, of cruising black autos and flashing Tommy guns. But when the city slept, one voice wavered in the stillness, drawing men like moths to the blaze of her siren song. Once they came to adore her, to forget, to float away on melancholy waves of golden sound. She gathered all the lost souls of the world in her songs, and they wept in her voice. But that had been a long time ago. All that remained now were the records, playing softly over and over and over, until the old man could forget. Tonight, someday over you.
Please, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Hawkins won't be answering any more questions today. The death of his grandfather has been quite stressful enough for him.
Now that he's gone, could you elaborate on some of the strange rumors about him?
Pops has only been dead 3 hours, and already you hyenas are gnawing at his bones.
Don't swell her head, Hawkins. She hasn't worked her way out to hyena yet.
Please, Mr. Hawkins will answer questions tomorrow at a press conference. There will be no more questions for today. Press packets will be emailed out to your respective outlets this evening.
Come on, Foster. Who are those people? 10 minutes after I got off the phone with the funeral home, those scum were nosing around here with their cameras. Do you know they took pictures of him as they were putting him in the hearse?
Woodward Hawkins was a very public man. It's terrible for everyone. I'm very sorry about your loss.
You know, I thought that old man would live forever. Like, someone like him could just never die. You think someday I'd be 90, but Pops would still be knocking around this place. Still playing his records and talking about the good old days.
He certainly left behind a legacy. This place is quite the palace.
He never showed you around?
Never had the pleasure. Usually the agency had just handled everything over the phone, but obviously today, well, we just want to do right by your family.
I'll give you the nickel tour. An oil contractor started on the house in 1905, but his business fell through and he was forced to leave. It stood vacant until 1921 when Grandfather bought it and finished the job. I almost think he loved this house as much as he did his music.
It's amazing. He must have sold even more records than I'd realized.
He sold his share, but he wasn't much of a player. He'd tell you that himself. His real claim to fame wasn't in who he was, but who he discovered.
Hey, on the wall there, is that
Elliot Dawes? One of his first finds. Best harp player in his time. Maybe the best there ever was. I think this was taken outside of the Rose Club in Philadelphia.
Must have been tough for your grandfather these last couple of years. Walking past all these people. All these faces staring out from the wall. It's like living in a house full of ghosts.
That's strange. Do you hear that?
Hear what?
It's coming from inside his music room. This is where I found him this morning. Sitting right there in that chair, listening to the Victrola. I could have sworn I'd shut it off.
You had other things on your mind. Whoa, this is some record collection. It's like the Library of Congress in here. Wow, an original acetate master of Deke Williams from his good years. What is it?
Just looking at this record that Grandfather was listening to before he died. I thought I knew everything in his collection, but this, it's Marlena Mathis.
You're pulling my leg.
You think I'm joking, Mr. Foster? Today of all days?
Of course not, but it's impossible. Marlena never recorded anything. All the history book says she was adamant. She wouldn't even get near a studio. She was terrified of him.
Well, Grandfather had a way of getting the things he wanted out of people. He used to say she was the greatest torch singer who ever lived.
She's incredible.
She's everything Pop's always said she was. A real star.
But I don't get it. Why didn't he press this? Why wouldn't he have shared this with the rest of the world?
Could be he wanted her all to himself. Or maybe she just wanted it this way. He kept a lot of things to himself, especially when it came to her. It's a crime. It's in such terrible condition. I guess we just add it to the list of recordings lost in action.
It doesn't have to say that way. There are people who could restore it.
If Granddaddy saw fit to never release it, then I don't think we should meddle with it.
I'm not talking about something for the public. It's just for you, for preservation's sake. I have got a guy with a whole restoration outfit. He can digitize it and clean it up so well you'd think she laid down that track yesterday.
I'd be lying if I said I wouldn't like to hear that. You really think he could do something with it?
I can ask. Worst thing that can happen is he can't do anything with it. And you're stuck with a record with only a few more plays left in it.
Not much use in a record you can never play. This friend of yours, he reliable? Will he take good care of it?
Oh, if he gets a shot at a Marlena Mathis record, he'll treat it like it's a holy relic.
It is, son. It is. I'll let you take it to him with one condition. No publicity, no media coverage, not a whisper to anyone who doesn't need to know about it. And absolutely no word that this was the last thing Grandfather ever listened to. Outside of this room, it doesn't exist. You feel me?
Cross my heart and hope to... I'm sorry. Poor choice of words.
Goodbye, Mr. Foster.
April 22nd, 1925. Today's my 28th birthday, but I feel bone tired, like I'm 100 if I'm a day. Seems no matter how much sleep I get, it's never enough. My cousin says I need to see a doctor, but I can't pay with the little money I make scrubbing floors at the boarding house. For so long, I prayed and prayed on this. But at last, I think the Lord has sent me an angel. A man come to our church social today and listened while I sang. He said I have a special gift and that he could help me if I let him. He's sending a car for me on Tuesday. I don't know where he means to take me, but I have a feeling he's important. That he's a special man himself somehow. Maybe things are about to change for the better.
Hang on. Hang on. Who's there?
Hello? I can barely hear you.
Foster? Foster? Wait a second. Foster, is that you?
Yes. Hi, Mr. Hawkins. Do you have a minute? I have an update on our special project.
Sure, I'll buzz you in. I'm in the music room. You remember the way?
Be right there.
Alrighty then. Little help to pull this together. Let's get these records back where they belong. And these should go here. Where the devil is Volume 3 gone? I swear I left it. Ah, Bessie Smith goes here, or... You are just in time. Can you help an old man move a bookcase?
What? Sure, I guess.
All right, grab that end. I'll go that way.
Aren't you rich people supposed to hire people to do this?
I do for myself. It keeps me from just sitting here feeling sorry for myself. And I've learned a thing or two.
Like what?
You start rearranging a man's house, and you make some interesting discoveries. Like this old trunk I found in the attic just this morning. What do you think that is, young squire?
A diary. Was it your grandfather's?
Marlena's. Picture of her inside the cover there, too. Face like an angel. She was something, sure enough. You starstruck, son?
Look, Woody, we need to talk about her record.
Your friend made some progress? I'm sure looking forward to hearing what he did.
Have you seen the news today? Gone online?
Haven't bothered since the day Pops died. TV was talking about him having mob connections. People saying he had AIDS or something. Nobody believes anybody can just die of a heart attack anymore.
You should look at this. Today's paper. I'm afraid the word is out about the recording. They'll leak the information to the press.
Says here Marlena's single, Someday Over You, will be released in 3 weeks.
I am so sorry. I had no idea about this until this morning. I opened this up and there it was.
They're saying the record was never released because it was a cover-up. That Pops had her murdered because she was singing about an affair with him. Those lyrics weren't about him.
You sure about that?
What, you want to drag his name through the mud too?
No, I'm saying the media is going to talk about this with or without you. Maybe if you showed them the diary.
I wish to God I hadn't have played you that record. Nothing but trouble. Nothing but trouble.
But is there something in her journal that might clear this up? Something that tells who the lyrics really are about?
What's in that book isn't nobody's business except Marlena's.
And your grandfather's. Why else would she have left it to him unless they were close? Or maybe he got a hold of it because of something she said that he didn't want getting out.
He was a harmless old horn man who took pity on a woman whose life had done wrong. He had nothing to hide.
Even good men have secrets, Woody. Mistakes they've made, things they regret. We've all hurt people. Even people we'd never mean to hurt at all.
Off! Off! This crazy Victrola's been acting up for weeks. Spring must have gone bad.
That was another Marlena record. You found more?
I didn't find anything, you hear me? As far as the rest of the world knows, that record I gave you is the only thing Marlena ever left behind in this world. And it's gonna stay that way. You're gonna help me stop the man from releasing that record. It's mine, you hear me?
Well, the trouble is it isn't exactly. The record is, sure, but the reproduction rights? Unless there's some receipt that your uncle paid her for it, technically it doesn't belong to anyone anymore.
Don't you play games with me.
I'm on your side, Hawkins. Honest, I'm just explaining the situation. Find me something that shows the recordings were for his label, and we can put a stop to this release. Find out why your pops hid the evidence of these sessions, we can muzzle the press. I think all our answers are in that diary. If you don't want to read it, then I will just take...
I'll dig up the dead on my own, thank you, Mr. Foster. I'll let you know if I find anything.
Whatever the agency can do, just let me know.
July 8th, 1926. 1 year in Chicago and how things have changed. What a different world this is from my humble little home in Spring Oak. It's so much brighter here, so much more lively. Woodward looks over me like a rooster over a laying hen, and he dotes over my littlest needs. But at times, I wish I had real friends with which I could pass the time. For all its many splendors, this city can be lonely at night. Come to think of it, I don't think I've seen a familiar face more than twice in the audience at any of my performances. Woodward keeps us moving, never playing the same club more than 2 nights in a row. He says it's what's best for us, but the other performers tell me it's an odd way of doing business. Whatever his reasons are, I have to believe he's doing this for us. and that he has my best interest at heart, 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 at
heart. Oh, Lordy. You settle down now. Settle down. You're beating a mile a minute. No reason for that at all. Where'd I leave that phone? Hello?
You okay? You sound like you had a morning.
I'm fine. What do you want?
Well, I was calling to see if you'd found anything in Marlena's journal.
Nothing in it.
Really? Nothing at all. Totally blank.
It's just piddly stuff, Foster. Club dates, money woes, her illness. Only thing about Pops is just about him helping her out and managing her show. Not a thing in it would give him any reason to want to shut her up.
So, there's nothing about the investigation.
Investigation?
I thought for sure she'd mention it.
I don't know what you're talking about. What investigation?
After everything started, I dug into the old PR files. Stuff that's been locked up for years. Seems that back in 1926, your Pops was the prime suspect in a series of deaths in Chicago.
What?
It was a big case. 15 men all died in mysterious circumstances. The last any of them were seen alive were at clubs where Marlena had been performing. Cops thought he was killing off men who got too close to her.
I never heard tell of it.
Our agency takes care of our people, Mr. Hawkins. They buried it deep. You sure there's nothing in those journals?
Lord Almighty. Woodward keeps us moving.
What did you say? I didn't catch what...
How'd those men die?
Well, weirdest thing about it. 15 men, all dead with no sign of a prior health problem. Police thought he might have used some kind of poison on him.
It wasn't no poison. How fast can you get here?
15, maybe 20 minutes, but what do you...
We gotta get to your friend that has Marlena's record and shut him down.
I don't think you'll be able to talk him out of it.
You leave that to me. Just move it.
It's been weeks now since the last time I took the stage. I'm so very weak and tired. Worse now than I've ever been. I feel as though the skin is about to slide off my bones. But Woodward says I gotta sing to stay well. That I have to keep at it and keep singing as long as there's anyone left to listen to me. That's my cure. He thinks maybe if I cut a record, maybe things will change. In my heart, though, diary, there is a black cloud there I can't explain. When I think of that needle carving my voice into eternity, a part of me goes stone cold. I don't believe we were meant to live on past the time the good Lord's given us on this earth. Surely such a thing is unnatural, and I can't help but think a terrible price must be paid for our arrogance.
Look, Mr. Hawkins, I don't know what you're hoping to achieve here, but...
Those cops had one thing right, Foster. Pops was in love with her, and he was willing to do whatever it took to save her life. It's between the lines in everything she says in that journal. Open up in there!
So you do think he was killing people for her?
You didn't listen to a thing I said on the way over here, did you?
I think you're grasping for any reason that your grandfather wasn't behind what happened, which is understandable.
Hey, can I help you guys with something?
Depends. You the dude that's got my record?
This is Mr. Hawkins, Steve.
Hawkins. Oh, the Marlena Mathis record.
So you do have it?
What? Me? No. I'm just third monkey on the totem pole. You're looking for Bill. He's working inside.
Then how about we go inside and pay Bill a visit?
Get those headphones off of him.
Turn off that music.
Bill, wake up! Come on, man, come on!
Does he have a pulse?
You ain't gonna find no pulse, son. How do I cut off the music?
Bill, listen to me. Bill, you can do this. You can do this. Come on.
How do I turn off the music?
Can't you see a man's dying here?
He's already gone.
Wait, Hawk, what are you...
What's wrong with you? A man's dead, and you come in and wreck the booth?
I want to know where the original is.
What original?
Marlena's record. You gonna show it to me right now, or I'm gonna do worse to you than I did to that console.
Just do what he's asking, Steve. Give it to him.
It should be there in a sleeve on the shelf. I'm getting security.
Careful with that record. You can't do it, Hawkins. She was one of a kind. You can't destroy that voice. Can't take away what she spent a lifetime to create.
It ain't her lifetime we have to worry about anymore, Foster. Don't you get it? Don't you understand that all those folks that died back in the day were dying because of her and her voice? That's what kept her alive. Then when Pops recorded her, he bottled up all that bad mojo. Every time someone listens to it, it gets a chance to kill again.
That's crazy!
I'd say tell your dead friend here that, but I suspect he ain't listening no more. Rest in peace, Marlena.
Oh no. You sure Bill's dead?
I don't know, but yeah, I think so. He wasn't moving and I couldn't feel a pulse.
Who's the one that busted up this console?
That would be me.
Then sit down. I'll deal with you after the ambulance gets here.
Now that we stopped Marlena's record going out, I got all the time in the world.
You're joking, right? I mean, you don't seriously think your bullshit stopped the release? Didn't you tell him, Foster?
I hadn't gotten the chance.
You know what century we're living in now, right, Grandpa? Destroying the record, destroying the master tape? You didn't destroy a thing. Bill sent the Wave preview file out to every blues station in town last night.
Tell me he's lying, Foster.
See, asshole? We even got an app for it. For your phone. Look.
Stop it! Stop it!
Sir, you're gonna need to have to calm down.
Shut it off! Shut it off! Shut it off! Shut it off!
A sacrifice for art that went a little too far. A sad song sung once too often that rings in the heart of Woody Hawkins, grandson of the greatest blues producer who ever lived. No one seems to notice that heart fatalities are on the upswing in Chicago this year, except for one special visitor to the Uncharted regions.
Someday Over You was written, directed, and produced by Neil Halford and Jana Halford. Featured in tonight's cast were Daniel Pierce, Ron Christopher Jones, Patrick Gates, Devonna Williams, Vander Turner, Randy Davison, and Kristen Naomi Garcia. Someday Over You original lyrics and music by Neil Halford, arranged and performed by Carvin Knowles and Devonna Williams. Original soundtrack by Carvin Knowles. Production engineers were Don Johnson, Neil Halford, Carvin Knowles, Devonna Williams, and Daniel Pierce. Production assistants were Kristen Naomi Garcia and Alex E. McDaniel. Special thanks to Beth Accomando, KPBS, Miguel Rodriguez, Don Johnson, Keith Lane, Ben Ragunton, and Pond 5. This episode was sponsored by Two Gay Geeks and Billy Joe Kane. Uncharted Regions is a production of Swords and Circuitry Studios, which is solely responsible for its content.
That was Someday Over You, the kickoff episode of the radio drama Uncharted Regions. Thanks for listening to another episode of listener-supported KPBS Cinema Junkie podcast. Cinema Junkie is also a proud supporter of the Ken Cinema's Midnight Movies, which will be devoted to horror and zombies for the next few weeks, beginning with George A. Romero's classic Dawn of the Dead this weekend. It'll be followed by Shaun of the Dead, Evil Dead 2, and Rocky Horror Picture Show with Shadowcast. If you enjoy Cinema Junkie, please tell a friend. The best way to help build an audience for a podcast is word of mouth. People trust a personal recommendation more than any advertisement. So bring a friend into the Cinema Junkie listening family. Till our next Film Fix, I'm Beth Accomando, your resident Cinema Junkie.